I'm Colin.
And I'm Megan.
And this is
Pet Sitter Confessional, an open and honest discussion about life as a pet sitter.
Brought to you by Time to Pet. Who knew pictures would play such an important role in our day-to-day lives as pet care professionals? Clients expect great ones, and we like to provide them too. I've probably taken more pictures of other people's pets over the past 10 years than literally anything else. This week, pet photographer Jenna Regan joins us to talk about all things photo, from staying organized to what makes a great photo and everything in between. So regardless of whether you have a DSLR or just the camera in your phone, we can all step up our game when it comes to taking photos. Jenna has a lot of information and knowledge and experience to share, and I can't wait to share this episode with you. So let's get to it. So Jenna, could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to. So my name is Jenna Regan. I'm a professional pet photographer, and I specialize in capturing people and their pets. So that's an everyday full-time thing for me with my clients and their pets.
Wow. How'd you get started with that?
Well, it's kind of a roundabout thing for me, to be honest. I'm sure a lot of people can relate of just, growing up with animals and loving all sorts of animals and being the person that's surrounded by them in some way all the time. And after I graduated from Texas A&M, I had a degree in agricultural communications and journalism. And that very last semester, I took one photography class. And I did a whole bunch of projects, and they always centered around animals. Every time, all my friends, all my contacts were, somehow in the animal department in one way or another. And I just started photographing. And after I left school, I had a brief pause and trying to decide which direction I was going to go. And I kind of somehow was inspired to jump in with photography primarily, but really with an animal emphasis. And it snowballed from there.
And how many years have you been doing it now?
It is, year 8, I think.
Wow, that's awesome.
It's kind of scary. I'm like, thinking out loud. Wow, it has gone by fast.
Sure,
all at once.
Yeah, yeah, fast and slow days for sure. So as a photographer, I'm sure you have some favorite gear that you like to use. What are you using these days?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It is an important part. I won't dismiss it by any means. But I don't think gear's like the most important thing. I think it's like how you use it. So I think, anybody can take like good photos in different ways with what they have. But for me, of course, it makes sense, to have professional gear. I use Canon DSLRs. And I really don't think a lot of times I get questions like, well, what's the, Canon versus Nikon and Sony and stuff like that. I don't really think that's, the thing that to get hung up on, but it's just what I'm comfortable with and what I learned on. So that's what I just stick with. And I often get asked a lot about lenses too, because oftentimes that makes the difference, like having the removable lens to change, for different focal lengths and distances and stuff. And I don't have I bounce around depending on how I feel inspired, but, on the subject matter and things, but often it's a longer focal length for me. So like 70 plus.
Wow. And is that because you like to shoot from a little further away, or you can really get a difference in the backgrounds when you're doing the photos?
Both, actually. Okay. And it just depends. But for me, I like the longer focal lengths because it creates more compression. In the backgrounds, and I can usually minimize, the distracting potentially, depending on where we're at and what we're doing. But there could be like some distractions in the background, maybe cars or the distance, or if we're at a public park, or maybe there's people, maybe sometimes there are people in the background. I usually just edit them out in Photoshop, to be honest. But, at least it makes them blurry.
Yeah,
to start with.
Yeah. So you mentioned that it's not really all about the equipment, but how you use it. So how would you define what makes a great picture?
It's so subjective. So I don't want to just say my thoughts or, the only thing that's considerable for this topic. But me, I feel like for me, my standards for myself and when I complete a photo session and, as I'm going through and making sure I've got the right stuff to present to my clients, I feel like it has to show personality and really capture who that pet is. And so that's going to be different every time, but I want it to look like them and, feel a connection to the picture, when I, for my clients and for me, spending that time with them, being able to look at that photo and be like, yeah, that's exactly how she was, that kind of thing. So I think it comes down to showing the soul and emotion in some way.
Mm. So how much time do you typically spend with your clients before you actually start taking photos? And do you spend any time trying to get to know them beforehand so you can capture their personality?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do. I actually spend a lot of time on this. It's a huge part of my process. I do what I call portrait planning appointments with my clients. And sometimes that includes the pets. Sometimes not. It just depends because I have often, depends if my clients want to come to me or they want me to come to them. For logistics, but it really involves just like getting a lot of backstory and just connecting with the clients and learning, what they love most about their pets and the stories behind the years of their, lives together. So there's things that I learned that, lead us kind of on a direction to go later on, or I feel like it gives me a good insight on what would make them ultimately like most happy in the end by what they tell me. And I ask a ton of questions and people tell me so many things. There's often so many emotional elements to, the years of having pets. And, sometimes they're older pets and, and then sometimes we have the opposite where they're puppies, but, they might've lost a pet and that comes back up to the surface as well. So just the backstories and connecting. And I think that's a major theme in my entire photography approach is connecting, whether it's with people or animals.
Yeah, I mean that's such an integral part to that. If you're trying to capture their personality, if you don't know who they are, how would someone expect that to happen? So it's amazing to hear all of that front end work that you're doing to get to those photos. That the photo session is just that one time, but you're doing all this other stuff before then, so that you can get the most out of that time you have with them. So after you get those photos and you're bringing them back and you're in your office, do you have a philosophy when it comes to photo editing?
I don't know if I'd say philosophy, but
yeah.
I don't like to like change things in a, really distort reality kind of way, but I like to like clean things up a lot. So if we have, it's inevitable. And this is part of, the professional element of being a photographer. It's not the easiest thing to do, in a general way, but for me, it just kind of has to be perfect.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'm doing things like cleaning up stray hairs, drool, leashes. Just like I said, if a person happens to walk through the very back of our shot, like I'm going to edit that person out later, hopefully with that longer focal length, I've blurred them. So it's not like a sharp person's, added to this portrait. It's kind of more just a little bit of distraction, but I can take care of it.
Sure.
Yeah. So I just feel like I don't like to do anything crazy drastic, but I do like to brighten eyes. I like to feel like things are clean. I like to have bright colors. Overall, just my style of imagery is, I feel like pretty bright and sunny, warm. To me, it feels like you can almost be in that moment.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Do you find yourself typically doing most photo shoots inside or outside?
For me, it's up to my clients which way we go, but more of my clients request outdoors.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. What's kind of your busiest season for photos?
Well, to be honest, because I do this full time, I really run the same pace year round.
Oh, really? Okay.
I pretty much take on the same amount of clients, but I will say, of course, the holiday season, as you would kind of expect, is busier because everybody has the same deadline.
Yeah.
I work on a more concise, condensed timeline for these clients.
Yeah. So after you took that class and you started working, is there anybody in the photography field that has really, you felt like has influenced your style and your way of taking photos?
I think I would, and I feel, there's a lot of people that do it, but I think I always kind of lived in my own bubble for the longest time because I wasn't trying to be a professional photographer, wasn't like, really looking into the pet world. I thought I was just kind of doing my own thing initially. So I kind of wasn't affected too much in the early stages. But as I went on with my development as a photographer, and then as more so as an entrepreneur and business owner, I started learning more about the industry as a whole. And I felt like I've really identified with the style of a photographer named Jamie Piper. She has Cowbelly Media, I believe is what she calls it now. And I just really like that her images are bright. There's personality, connection. It's not not the same kind of pose or idea in every photo with just like different backgrounds, or it's very, very diverse and very much shows like a moment in time to me.
Yeah, I like the idea of when you go to talk to a photographer and if they're showing you some of their portfolio, when they're not all the same, when you are able to see that. It's not like a J.C. Penney's photo booth where here, this is the three backgrounds we have. You can hold the box or you can hold the hat and we take our photos.
Right. Yeah. And there's like a place for everything, I'm sure. But this is, just me. Like my thing is just making sure that it feels unique all the way around.
Yeah. So after 8 years, how has the industry of pet photography changed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it's becoming more known. I still have a lot of clients or a lot of interactions with people where they're like, "Oh, that's a thing." I was buying an excessive amount of dog toys today for some upcoming photo shoots, and the cashier asked me if I got a new puppy. And I said no. These are explained a little bit, but she just kind of looked at me like, "Huh, interesting." Like I could tell she was just like skeptical about that being a job or something.
Sure, yeah.
But it is like, I think it is becoming more popular or more, I get a lot of referrals and I feel like it's being talked about more or, shared more. I guess maybe with, of course, we've had a great, social media presence anyway, but I don't know, maybe there's just more people out there sharing and talking and taking more photos themselves too.
Sure. Yeah. And that was I was interested in trying to learn about how, given that a lot of people are still learning that pet photography is a thing, how you get most of your business. And it sounds like it's mostly referrals from customer to customer.
Yeah, I would, it seems to ebb and flow in waves. I do think that like social media has a little bit of an impact, like our own accounts and what we put out there.
Yeah.
The website, referrals, repeat, that's, it's not, like greater compliment or, excitement do I get like, with clients coming in when it's a repeat, like how much more fun can it be to like see a pet or a client again and reconnect and do something different. And, maybe they have a new pet added to the family, that kind of thing. So it just kind of varies.
No, that's cool.
Oh, and I donate too for like charities and stuff like that. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So if they're fundraisers and things like that, you offer a photography package, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's really neat. I really like hearing when people give back to the community in that way, and provide those services to people and try and build value, and it also helps get your name out there too. A little bit of advertising as well.
Absolutely, I totally agree with that. And it's a nice. I mean, we all have like hearts for animals, so it is a really nice thing for to be able to give back and know that it's helping a good cause and meet people who have those same interests because they're at these events or what have you. So we connect on that level, and oftentimes they're rescue pets that I photographed as a result, and it's just an all around like positive experience and great people.
Yeah, because you still want to be able to help out in some way, and we all have our skills and our gifts and talents, and finding out where and how we can use those. I'm not a dog groomer. Nobody would want me to groom their dog for part of a charity event. But but we would gladly offer our services to care for an animal as part of something like that. So knowing where you can give back and how is important.
Absolutely.
Have you heard about Time to Pet? Dan from NYC Pooch has this to say.
Time to Pet has been a total game changer for us. It helped us streamline many aspects of our operation, from scheduling and communication to billing and customer management. We actually tested other pet sitting softwares in the past, but these other solutions were clunky and riddled with problems. Everything in Time to Pet has been so well thought out. It's intuitive, feature-rich, and it's always improving.
If you are looking for new pet sitting software for your business, give Time to Pet a try. As a listener of Pet Sitter Confessional, you'll get 50% off your first 3 months when you sign up at timetopet.com/confessional. So after after looking back over the past 8 years, do you have a favorite photo or special memory of a photo session?
Let's see. I'll start with special memory because favorite photo is a little harder. So a couple years ago, I have a lot of, and don't get me wrong, it's very hard to even like pick one, but I'm just going with what comes to mind.
Yeah.
A couple years ago, I got to photograph a very, very sweet dog named Bessie. It was actually part of a charity project that I was doing for a rescue here that does a calendar every year, a basset rescue.
Oh.
And I was their photographer for the year. I donated my services and I did 12 months plus the cover. And we had it spaced out over several months. And it was supposed to start like May, or maybe it was like summertime. I think it was supposed to start in summer. But I got a frantic call right after the event. And after they were all purchased and bid on. Sorry if I'm making it sound a little more confusing. But basically, everybody made these. I donated my time and then they were auctioned off and purchased. And one of the purchasees, she didn't realize when the condition of her dog, and she ended up having a dog that was in really poor health, and we were down to the wire for looking like if the dog would be able to make the calendar timeline wise. And so we expedited the photo session, and she was scheduled to be, unfortunately they knew that her health problems, and it was just in her best interest to not prolong it. So it was really sad, but we photographed her a few days before, and my client gave her like the most amazing, like last couple days of her life doing all these fun things. And one of them was my photo session. So it was just really cool. She was such a sweet dog. And the very last picture I took was her like walking down this path. And she turned back around and looked at me, and we caught that moment. And it was so sad and so happy at the same time. My client cried and I cried later but like she picked that for the cover, and she was the month of December, and it was just really sweet. And it was, totally like achy for, heartache here talking about it. But I just felt such a connection to that client and that dog. And I felt so good to like have made that happen for her, because those pictures are, on the top of her most treasured things. So
yeah, knowing that, this is, one of, if not the most loved being in somebody's life, and you have the opportunity to come in and give them a gift that's going to last the rest of their life, right? That photo was not just a one-time thing. It's going to be on the calendar. It's, I'm sure that person looks at that every day and has fond memories of that. And I can't imagine what it's like to be able to give that to somebody, knowing it's not just a photo, it's a memory.
Yeah, it really is special in that way. It definitely makes me feel fulfilled in what I'm doing when I can give that to people, even when it is hard for all of us, when we're in those kind of moments. And then, when they lose pets and I hear, a little part of me, my heart breaks when I get those kind of updates. But, I often get, great, at the same time get like so much positive feedback on how much the pictures mean and how glad they are that they did it and all that kind of stuff. So,
yeah. So when you're in there and you're taking the photos of somebody's pets, do you find that they're leery of the camera and all the equipment?
They can be, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
For me, a lot of my stuff is a lot bigger. Bigger cameras, bigger lenses, that kind of thing than they've ever been around.
Okay.
And my approach to that is always just to go slow. I try to tell my clients, that we're not, for me, I've just kind of sum this up a little better. I've always approached it like we're not on a strict time schedule. I don't tell my clients like, oh, we have 45 minutes and go, or anything like that. So I just take as long as we need. And I just keep in mind that like the beginning of a session to me influences how the rest of it's going to go. So I would rather go, real slow, work through what any sort of kinks we find in this, like the process for the dog or cat. If it's a cat, that's another thing too. They often are more leery.
Yeah.
And just see what we can do to just calm them and calm my clients, because oftentimes, everybody feels the pressure of it being like be time to perform.
Yeah. Especially knowing, okay, I've paid for this service, and now make magic happen. And that doesn't always happen.
Yes, that's a very good way to describe it. So So yeah, I just go slow and I try to use positive reinforcement and I try to know what I'm getting into. That's part of the planning beforehand. Some pets are just going to take to it naturally because they just love, attention and are not at all bothered. And others, I know that I'm, going to have to take a different approach.
So how do you handle those difficult clients?
Well, first off, in my planning, I try to figure out if I have a difficult pet or not,
Okay.
and to me, it's not a bad thing if they are. I love, the challenge doesn't bother me. And as a professional, I feel like I can come up with a plan, but I kind of have to know, a little bit before. That's the thing. So I try to really feel out the client and take any any signals or red flags or anything that they might mention. Maybe they don't think they have a difficult pet, but I'm wondering if it might be a little more challenging than they think.
Sure. Yeah.
That sometimes happens. And in the moment, well, I'll add another note to that. I base my locations too on the type of pet or the personality of the pet for what would make the most sense for, a successful photo session. So if we have a highly anxious dog, I don't want to be at the most popular park on Saturday afternoon,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we kind of strategically plan those details before as well. But in the moment, I just try to, use a lot of common sense with dogs and, give them space, be on their level, go slow, use rewards, positive reinforcement, treats. And I tell my clients I'm not above bribery at all. That's going to happen with me.
Yeah.
So I try to, just be, as quiet and gentle as possible.
Yeah. And kind of just letting the dog or the cat tell you when they're ready. And I'm sure you do a lot of reading body language and kind of some animal handling in there too.
Yes, all three. Very good points. Yeah.
Well, hopefully by now, anybody listening to this would not think this, but I know many people do that think taking photos is just as easy as clicking a button. And for some reason, those people are never satisfied with how their pictures turn out. When should somebody seek out a professional versus trying to do it themselves?
I would say if there's a challenging pet, that, rather than make it a traumatic event, maybe just bring a professional in from the beginning, I would also say if there's multiple pets or multiple species, dogs and cats together or other animals, I think that, the more you're adding, just logically, the more challenging it's going to be. So,
right.
So if you have high aspirations, for a big group portrait, that's probably a job for someone like me. If it's a once in a lifetime opportunity for some reason, to me, and I do get a lot of clients on both ends of the spectrum like this, whether it's a brand new puppy or it's an end of life, those moments are really precious usually, to my clients. And if they feel like, it's not going to be something they could ever, redo, if they're just experimenting and it doesn't work out, no big deal. But if it's, if there's high stakes to it, it's probably best to have a professional.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, listening to you and thinking, about all of the planning, all of the thought that goes into that, that's not something that I personally do when I take photos. And so when you're talking through these scenarios of challenging pets, multiple animals, once in a lifetime, I don't have the capacity to do that kind of planning. So those are definitely when I would be reaching out to somebody to take photos of my pets, because I wouldn't want to mess those up. So what's been the most difficult part of being a pet photographer?
You definitely have figured out I'm a planner. I like to have everything sorted out as best I can. And then at the same time, we can have this plan, my client and I, and then we can get there and, circumstances could be entirely different. And today's a different day. And, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I just have to roll with it a lot. So I feel like I do well with this now, but I feel like potentially that would have, once upon a time was more challenging to just adapt a little more. Because ultimately you're working with animals and there's things you cannot control, Mother Nature, outdoors, wind, sun, clouds, active dogs, lazy dogs that don't care, dogs that want to do other things, cats that want to hide.
Sure.
All these things are bringing up good memories, but I think you have to be flexible. And I'm sure, a lot of people who just have pets in general get it. But as like it being my job, it's even harder because, I have these expectations or these plans, and I sometimes have to go with like what's possible.
Sure. So what motivates you to keep going through those difficulties?
I guess part of it would be at this point just the experience. And in my mind, I know that I always come up with something. I always have an answer. I figure it out. It's, not that you ever see everything or that you're ever done growing, but there's been a lot of circumstances and, reflecting back that we've overcome to have, great images in the end, and people wouldn't know the backstory. I guess that's a little bit of the benefit too, as far as the end result. Nobody knows exactly what we had to go through to make that happen, whether it was easy or whether it was hard. I mean, in the end, and my clients, of course, have had a good time, and I've reassured them and they're comfortable throughout this whole process, so they don't have any negative feelings or anything about it. But, I have to be sure not to show it on my face and in my mannerisms, and animals pick up on all that. So it's just it's a delicate balance of being responsible for a lot and, wanting to being, very myself as like a high achiever perfectionist is sometimes a little, have to kind of rein it in.
Right. Balancing those personal expectations with the ultimate outcome of the entire product.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as long as we get something, the clients are ultimately, are going to be happy, and, we always come through one way or another.
Yeah. I think the most frequent question that we get is, how do you get the pet to sit still?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, like I said, bribery is a big thing, but and I always clear it, of course, with my clients, because you have to be sure of special diets or allergies or things like that. And we bring treats, and my clients bring treats and stuff like that. And we do small portions and, just kind of enough to keep them engaged as needed, where we're reading the body language of what's a good idea and what's not for treats. But also dogs are motivated by different things, not always food, cats too, affection, toys. There's different, like some dogs just love to like get a little break and go take in the smells and, stretch their legs, and then they come back and they're, ready for the next thing. But it's just kind of, finding out what would be a good reward and giving it as throughout the process.
So let's say I figured out that reward. We've done some planning, and let's say that I even have a good DSLR or micro four thirds. Why are my pictures not still turning out the way I'd like them to be?
Let's say hypothetically. Well, some things that I would look at is, are they completely in focus? Sometimes my clients will even show me photos. Maybe they're taking themselves or different things throughout our process and say like, oh, look at this is one of my favorites. And sometimes I can just tell that it's actually not in focus. It kind of looks halfway, but,
okay.
And so perhaps like a reason why that might happen could be because you're moving too fast, as you're photographing. You might not have a fast enough shutter speed if you have the DSLR and you're setting those kind of things and working with a manual mode or shutter priority or something like that. What are the other reasons? Maybe they're too dark. Maybe the light isn't, quite right on the dog itself.
Yeah.
Maybe you're standing, kind of over the dog and your body's casting a shadow yourself, or maybe you picked, a location that's really, really heavily treed and it's a dark day and there's not a lot of available light source. Let's see, what other things would I see? I think probably blurry and dark are two really popular ones. Can you think of other potential things?
Yeah, no, I was trying to think of that too. I think the other side of this is that most of us don't have DSLRs on hand, and we're actually taking pictures with a smartphone. And so what kind of principles of photography can we apply to using a smartphone to take pictures of our pets?
Absolutely. I still think I think amazing photos can come off iPhones and stuff as well. Mm-hmm. So my tips for using an iPhone or cell phone for pictures would be to slow down again. If the camera shake or, moving, or, if you're holding a dog's leash and they're pulling or something and your hand's going forward, at the same time you're trying to take a portrait, you're going to have some blur to it. So I would slow down, get some help, maybe, someone else to hold the leash or, wrangle a pet in some way. Mm-hmm. Let's see, what else would be good. Oh, I would get low. get on the dog's level. I don't know how much other people do that, but that's huge for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of changes the whole perspective too. And I can see how that would make some very interesting perspectives for photos of like, oh, I didn't know my dog looked like that from that level or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. You get to kind of see their world from their level, as well, which can be really comical when you have tiny pups or big dogs too. It's just a good strategy for sure. Get as low as you can, and practice, use different angles. You don't have to. I mean, sometimes I do like the shots from above as well, where they're looking right up at the camera, or, just by playing with it, you can get different angles. And, don't just do it from your own perspective of just standing, and taking one would be, a good way to mix it up.
Sure. How do you practice taking good photos?
Oh, so if I was going to give like someone suggestions on how to do that, I would say pick an easier, quotes are on this, an easier pet to start with, maybe maybe a pet that's like more laid back or highly trained. If you have friends that are dog trainers, or, maybe make a connection there to get, work with someone who has, highly trained pets. That would be a great way to not have as much stressor on the controlling the animal. The other thing I would say is to get help, bring someone in. Sometimes pets do a little bit better when they're not being, leash isn't being held by their owner. If you put the owner behind, I don't know how this will all work, because I realize with like dog walking or other businesses, you might not even be with the owner, but that's, totally fine too. I often think they do better when they're not in the control of like the person they're most familiar with.
Yes. Yeah. That's, we see that. I see that all the time of this dog's, my dog's crazy. They go, whatever. And then 30 minutes after they've left, the dog is asleep and, barely moves the rest of the time there. And they're just the most loving, laid back, no energy kind of animal. And then as soon as the owner gets in there, they go crazy and they're hyped up again. And yeah, it's separating the animal from the owner can show you an entirely different animal than what you expect.
Absolutely. I totally love that you guys see that in your world too. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely an interesting point.
Yeah.
So I would bring, someone in to help, like maybe it's a friend or a fellow dog walker, or someone who else is in the industry that is familiar with pets, because you want to have someone that definitely has a grasp on, body language and can be an asset to you, to practice. But, and then I just think practice, everything takes practice. So, not to be too, not to have, expect to be able to do the same things as I do, or, looking at professional portraits and thinking, that's going to happen right away.
Right.
It just takes time.
Sure. Jenna, do you have any final words of wisdom for us when it comes to taking pictures of our pet?
I think I would just say, enjoy it. These are, working with animals is a fun thing in any capacity, and to enjoy your time with them and explore the world from their perspective, by changing those angles and doing the things they love to do, that stuff makes for great photos. It's an enjoyable time for everyone. It's good for the pet. And those are, like we kind of talked about earlier, those are the kind of moments and places and time and things that people really look back and love. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Jenna, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing all those great tips and helpful pointers. It's a wonderful thing to hear all of the forethought and planning that you go through to make those photos that makes them not just a snapshot in time, but a memory that lasts forever. So how can people get in touch with you and follow along with your work?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I am online. I have social profiles on all the websites, of course, Jenna Regan Photography. And then there's a lot of content and information and examples and stuff on my website, jennaregan.com.
Okay, well, wonderful. Thank you again for coming on today, Jenna.
Thank you for having me. It was lovely to chat with you guys.
Like I said at the beginning of the episode, regardless of what you're using to take the photo, there are so many other things that you can be doing to making sure that you're taking the best quality photo that you possibly can. Jenna is a great resource. If you have any other photography-specific questions, definitely reach out to her. She would love to help. We want to once again thank Time to Pet for sponsoring this week's episode. If you have questions or maybe stories that you'd like shared on the podcast, reach out to us at feedback@petsitterconfessional.com. You can follow along and stay up to date with everything that we're doing on our website at petsitterconfessional.com. And join us on social media at Pet Sitter Confessional on Facebook and Instagram, as well as PS Confessional on Twitter.